What's up, everybody? It's Dave Fernape here, and welcome to another NPL interview. Today I'm here with the coach of the St. Louis Reshirams, Matty Brollic. Introduce yourself.
What's going on, guys? We got Matty Brollic here, excited for my first ever interview.
Alright, that's good. Thank you for giving us your time.
Of course.
So, last season you made the playoffs, and you unfortunately got knocked off in round one. Was that a disappointing end to the season for you?
You know, it was because we finished tied for second place, but the top three teams in terms of records were all in my conference, so we had a lot of competition in that side of the bracket. The other side of the bracket had a ton of competition as well, but like I said, top three were in my side, and that first round of the playoffs basically came down to two 50-50s, in which both I lost, so it was disappointing, but at least I could have said that I went out in a great game. It was a really close game, and Cheese just got the better of me, so he deserved to win that.
Well, as you said, it was a pretty good game, but unfortunately, I don't know why, but you decided not to upload it. Is there a reason why?
Because I couldn't figure out how to incorporate this intro that one of my friends made for me. And it was a very nice intro, definitely, but it was kind of confusing. I wasn't really getting it to work right. So because of that, I didn't want to just upload it without that intro because I know how much time and effort he put into it. So until he...
That's a lie. That's a lie.
If he wants to help me
That's a
put that intro in, I'll surely upload it.
That's a definite lie. I told you how. That's a lie.
I was confused.
No, you weren't.
I was. I'm bad with computers.
Okay, sure. So, your team this season, do you think it's better than your team last season?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I think it's my team last season had a lot of Pokemon that I was pretty comfortable using, and I thought that were fun, but I think in terms of actual potential and how good my team could be, if I could really use it well, I think it's better by a very large margin.
So, obviously, your first pick turned out to be Mega Gardevoir, and obviously, that's probably the best Pokemon in the entire format. How do you plan on using it? Do you want to run crazy sets with it, or are you going to be just kind of clear-cut whatever Mega Gardevoir normally does?
Well, that's the great thing about Mega Gardevoir. For those of you who do know who I am, you know that I like to run crazy sets and try to toss things up, but the amazing thing about Mega Gardevoir in this format is that what it's good at doing is so great when your opponent only has a roster of 10 to 11 Pokemon around there. So I could really do whatever I want. I could play mind games and make people think that I'm going to run crazy sets. I can just bring something completely standard and just have it work because it's so hard to switch into, and all of its pretty decent switch-ins, Gardevoir has some type of move in its arsenal to cripple all of them in some way. So I think that Gardevoir is going to have a very good season. It just kind of comes down to how well I can play it because it's got its flaws, and if those flaws are exploited, it may be a little underwhelming, but I'm pretty confident that Gardevoir is going to have a pretty monster season.
Do you feel that your team supports Mega Gardevoir pretty well?
I do. I definitely think it does. I think that the Dragon Fairy Steel Core that I picked around Gardevoir is very helpful. I think Magnezone, even though opponents can see that it does have Magnet Pull and they could decide to bring Shed Shell, I think that helps in the first place because switch-ins to Gardevoir don't really want to be holding Shed Shell when Gardevoir is just so strong it could do so much damage with its powerful attacks. So the fact that Magnet Pull Magnezone can force people to run Shed Shell is amazing, and then if they don't run Shed Shell and they end up getting trapped, then Gardevoir just goes to work even more. So I think I did draft a pretty good team all around to support it, but the thing is, Gardevoir doesn't even need to be supported that well because it's so good at what it does on its own.
So, when you drafted Infernape and Magnezone, were you planning on running a Volt Turn core?
You know what? That didn't come to mind right away just because when I think about Infernape, I just think about crazy amounts of possibilities. I used Infernape last year, and I definitely didn't use it to the best of my ability, but I still know that it's one of the in my opinion, best Pokemon in this format because it can work so well offensively and even pretty well defensively, and its support options are amazing. It does have access to the coveted U-turn, which does allow me to make a Volt Turn core. I think I may have thought about that at some point, but it wasn't the main reason I decided to draft it to. Infernape is just really good all around, and I think that having a lot more star power on my team doesn't really force me to rely on Infernape to be this crazy, powerful wall breaker and superstar that I kind of relied on it to be last year. So I think with that being said, Infernape can put in a lot of work, considering that the rest of my team could really bust holes into opposing teams, especially ones that Infernape can't bust itself, and then allow it to clean up in different ways and support in different ways. So, the fact that they make a Bolt Turn core as well is also pretty awesome.
Yeah, Infernape is a pretty powerful Pokemon. I would know because it's like my spirit Pokemon, my spirit animal, so I would know.
You don't say that, because Infernape is my spirit Pokemon. You know that, and
I'm literally an Infernape. I'm literally Dave for like I combined with an Infernape.
Yeah, but that's not really your name.
Hello? Yes, it is.
It is?
My real name.
Wow, I'm pretty jealous.
Okay. So, what other cores do you did you specifically pick? Did you pick Donphan and Slowbro because they support each other, or like Druddigon and Registeel?
When it came to cores, I didn't necessarily pick specific Pokemon to make specific cores, because it's kind of tough to do that in a format where a lot of different Pokemon are getting picked, and it's not like Smogon where you could just use whatever you want and use Pokemon that kind of synergize perfectly. But what I tried to do was just make sure that I have some of the really important defensive synergies that are really important in general, because I like to play offensively, but to have a chance to or to have the opportunity to go defensive in some ways is definitely really nice in the format, because it's not good to be one-dimensional, and I think that my Pokemon do allow me to not be one-dimensional. Donphan is really important because even though it is a pretty good Pokemon, one thing that was really important to me was that Rapid Spin is just amazing. It is amazing to have both Rapid Spin and Defog on a team, because it allows you both different types of hazard removal, and then also being a ground type, just a pure ground type, one that's not like 4 times weak to a certain move, allows it to stop Volt Switch quite nicely, which everyone knows that Fast Electrics do have a good track record in the format, and Donphan being able to slow down their momentum is huge. So that's why I like Donphan for that choice. Slowbro, all around, is just an incredible Pokemon. I think is very underrated in the format because it can just run so many different options, has a great defensive typing, really, really good ability, and its move pool is relatively limitless. It just has so many different coverage options, as well as the ability to be offensive, defensive, supportive, and Druddigon as well. It isn't a great defensive monster. It doesn't have like insane defensive stats, but they're solid. And with the ability Rough Skin, that kind of allows it to be kind of like a poor man's Garchomp, like a Rocky Helmet Garchomp. If you guys aren't familiar with that set, it's very common in the OU tier in Smogon. Druddigon could kind of be kind of like a poor man's version of that, because it does get Stealth Rocks, and its coverage and offensive prowess is amazing as well, with awesome abilities in Sheer Force, Mold Breaker, and Rough Skin. So Registeel was just kind of there because I wanted a really reliable Steel type switch into certain things, because Steel just has so many resistances and is so important defensively that I didn't feel like Magnezone could really get the job done in certain scenarios, because there's just so many different coverage options that could hit Magnezone pretty hard. So Registeel is that type of Pokemon that could really wall something if I needed to, with disgusting bulk and defenses. So that's a Pokemon that I'm not, too big on using. I don't really love using Pokemon that are that fat and lose that much momentum. But like I said, to have the option to just be able to check something defensively that I may need to is very nice.
How did you manage to pick up Gengar in like the 8th round?
Yeah, that was a really late pick, and I was so happy with it because I was thinking that I might get Gothitelle, but then I realized that if I went 1 point lower, I knew what my last 2 picks were going to be. I knew I wanted Estelgor and Shiftry, so I knew that if I went 1 point lower, then I could get Registeel, and if I went 1 point higher, I would probably go with Gothitelle and Escavalier. And I didn't really like Escavalier as that Steel type switch in that I just previously mentioned, because Steel Bug is definitely a good typing, only 1 weakness, but it's not a crazy bulky Pokemon, and it's not something that could just easily switch into a lot of the powerful attacks that I would need Registeel to switch into. So I figured Gothitelle is a spark plug in the format. Shadow Tag is a pretty broken ability, but I already have a Trapper and Magnezone. I don't like Gothitelle. I don't like using it. I don't enjoy playing with it. So I was like, you know what? Gengar is probably really underrated in the format because it kind of reminds me of Gardevoir in the sense that it can run. It has very few switch-ins naturally, and it has so many good moves that could cripple any potential decent switch-ins. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to go with Gengar because it also adds a nice ghost type and a decent defensive type to my team, decent amount of synergy and some pretty good speed and just amazing power that could be really hard to play around with the right coverage and the right set. So getting Gengar that late was an absolute steal, and I was really happy with that pick.
What playstyle are you planning on running? Because it looks like you can do multiple things, bulky, offensive, even like stall if you wanted to, or hyper offensive.
Right. As I mentioned before, I love to play offensively, whether it's a bulky offense, just having a couple bulky pivots, or all-out hyper offense. Those are my main styles when it comes to like Smogon battling and whatever it is. But when it comes to the format, although I'm not too used to playing really bulky or anything like stall, you got to do what you got to do. So the fact that I have those options to really go bulky and mix it up, I think is nice, because although I don't plan on doing that too often, because like I said, I'm not too used to it. It's not something that, like, maybe it will work in certain matchups, but if I'm not really too used to it, I'm not necessarily too comfortable to go with that type of playstyle. But the fact that I have the option really is important to me, because if it is the way to go and that's the best way to beat my opponent, then I can definitely go with it. But for the playstyles that I look to use the most, it's definitely some sort of offense.
Well, that's nice. That it definitely, your team puts an offensive pressure on a lot of other teams. Was there any Pokemon that you got sniped from?
It's funny. I literally, of course, there were Pokemon that I wanted earlier on, and I was like, I'd love to draft this Pokemon, but they got picked. But there was nothing that I was like, really thinking of. Like, every time I thought of what my next pick or my next two picks were going to be, I did not get sniped a single time. It was absolutely beautiful. There were 16 coaches, all really, really good players with, pretty similar thought processes and mindsets. And the fact that I didn't get sniped directly once was a miracle. I'm really happy about that.
Well, you're lucky for that. And is there any Pokemon in like free agency that catches your eye?
I took a really quick peek the other day, and there wasn't anything that was really jumping out at me. But as I mentioned in my draft analysis video, Registeel is not a Pokemon that I really think fits my team too well. It could do certain things really well, which is one of the reasons I wanted it. And it's just a very reliable defensive check to a lot of things. So I think that's just important in general, but it really doesn't fit my team too well. And it's not a Pokemon I'm really too accustomed to using. And I think it could kind of lose momentum for my mostly offensive team. So if it came to free agency, I could see Registeel being the one that I'd want to drop the most quickly for something else. But like I said, nothing really jumped out at me in the free agents. I didn't take a great look. I just kind of skimmed through it. But yeah, that's pretty much it for that.
Are you looking at any trades or negotiations with other coaches?
I haven't looked at anything like that yet. What I kind of did last year was let my weaknesses get exploited a little bit before I was quick to want to make transactions or trades. And this season, I think that I have the type of team that can really play around most other types of matchups. I think that I have a lot of versatility, a lot of really good Pokemon in general. Because last season I did have a good amount of versatility, but a lot of my Pokemon just weren't that great, or they just were lacking a little bit of star power to really bust through opponents' teams. So now I think I have all of that, and don't really think that my team has too many flaws when it comes down to it. But that's, it's the season hasn't started yet, so I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. So what I would probably do in that case is just let the season progress a little bit, and if I see certain gaping weaknesses, then I would definitely like to make some deals with other coaches and transactions, including free agency, to try to patch up those weaknesses.
Is there any role on your team that you see that hasn't been filled?
One that kind of jumped out at me that wasn't filled too well is whatchamacall, Defog. I do have two potential defoggers in both Dragonite and Shiftry, but Shiftry is not a very reliable defogger because it's pretty frail, not crazy fast, and it's primarily an offensive Pokemon. Its defensive typing really isn't very good, so even if I wanted to run a bulkier set, it, like I said, just defensive typing is not too good. But then Dragonite, which does have a good decently good defensive typing and great stats. The problem is it's weak to rocks. I don't like defoggers that are weak to rocks. And then it cannot run multi-scale with defog because defog was a Gen 4 move. And then, since it was from Gen 4, multi-scale didn't exist back then, I'd be forced to run inner focus, which doesn't mean it can't work, but it just means that my defoggers are a little bit, weaker compared to maybe some other teams. So those are the two that, those are the roles that kind of jump out at me. But other than that, I don't really see too many that I feel like I'm just really weak on. Maybe certain ones I just don't have great fulfillments, but I think that overall I could play around those certain weaknesses because my team just has a good amount of versatility and just good stats, good options, etc., etc.
Is there any other Pokemon, like on any other team, that you just wish, like somehow you could have?
You know what? Like there's broken stuff like Hoopa Unbound. That would be pretty awesome to have. What else? I really wanted to draft Thunderous Eye this season. That was one Pokemon that I really wanted. I've been playing with it a lot more in OU, and I've just been toying around with all these different sets it could possibly run, and its versatility and coverage is amazing, and that Priority Thunder Wave is so nice in any type of format, really. So that was a Pokemon I really wanted this year. I don't know why necessarily. I just really wanted it. So, yeah, that was something that if I could choose which Pokemon would you want on your team for whatever reason, I would probably go with Thunderous Eye. I don't know why, but yeah.
Is there anything that limited you, like any Pokemon that you couldn't get because of like cap space or something?
Not necessarily. I mean, towards the end of the draft, I only had 12 points left and picked up two Pokemon with that were worth 6 each, and I think they were two good and valuable 6s. I feel like a Selgor has pretty good options, and then it's just ridiculous speed is kind of a saving grace, because even though I have a good amount of pretty fast Pokemon, I don't really have any speed demons on my team, so a Selgor really helps me in that regard. And it's not just an offensive cleaner or anything like that. It could also run some different options with spikes, Encore, Final Gambit, stuff like that. So a Selgor is definitely a pretty nice pick. And then Shiftry, as I mentioned before, it does get access to defog, which is pretty cool. But really powerful priority. I think priority is really important, especially when, like I said, I don't have the fastest team. I don't have a ton of fast Pokemon, and a Selgor isn't always the best choice. So powerful priority and Sucker Punch. Access to the ability Chlorophyll is pretty cool too. And it was just a Pokemon that I said to myself for a while now, like, Shiftry looks really cool and fun to use. It has pretty good mixed attacking stats and a pretty nice move pool to exploit those, with access to both really potent setup moves in Swords Dance and Nasty Plot. So I think that Shiftry can be pretty interesting this season, but who knows? Like, that was one that was more of a guess. I've seen a Selgor do well. A Selgor has done well for me in tests as well, so I know that Pokemon is definitely a good 6. It's definitely a valuable 6-pointer. So I don't really think that I missed out on anything too specifically because of cap space, because I prefer having a whole nother Pokemon with so many different options rather than just spending it on one Pokemon that may be a little superior to some of these others.
Well, that's good. It looks like you're pretty happy with your team.
Definitely.
Are there any teams that you have a rivalry with? Any other coach?
I don't really think I do. Yeah, last season I didn't really have any specific rivalries. Any matches where I would just go back and forth with someone. But the one person that I really want to be able to beat this year is Cheese Boy, because I thought I prepped for him so well the first time I played him, and he ended up just barely edging me out. And then in the playoffs, same thing, like prepped so hard, and same thing, he just barely edged me out in a crazy game. So I'd really love to be able to beat Cheese Boy this season, because he always steps it up in his games, and I think that I have the team this year to really be able to beat him, because last season he had a great team, a really offensive and threatening team, and my team was okay. It was decent, but it definitely didn't match up too well against his. And even though I felt I played and prepped well both times, he just barely edged me out. So I'd love to get a win over him this season. But other than that, I don't really have uh, any particular rivals except for my division rivals, the people in my division.
Okay, so how do you feel that you match up as in your division? Do you feel like you have a good matchup, or?
I wouldn't say a good matchup necessarily. There are a lot of threats to my team in my division, and I have really good coaches as well. Returning champion Trev the King, obviously, and then just an all-around solid division. But as I keep mentioning, I feel that my team does have the ability to outplay a lot of different matchups, and I do think that my team is hard to prepare for as well. So, with that being said, I'm not particularly worried about what's in my division right now. I think it just kind of boils down to me actually playing those games and seeing how my opponents are going to prepare for my team and vice versa, and see what actually happens, because maybe there are things that I'm missing just by looking at it on paper that when I actually play the games, it could really kind of catch me off guard and surprise me, and maybe my team, I'll need to fix some weaknesses, etc., etc. So, yeah, right now there's nothing that really jumps out at me too much, but it's definitely a solid division, and I'm looking forward to seeing how I could do in it.
Of course, you have to play Trev, the coach of the Atlanta Braviaries, who's a two-time back-to-back champion. So, does that make you nervous in any way?
Not particularly. I do get pretty nervous when it comes to any NPL game, just because when you put a lot of preparation into building your team, and then you go out there and lose, it's really upsetting when you put all that time in and you test and you see that you're winning over and over again, or you just think that there's no way that your opponent's going to expect certain things, and then you just have it in the bag, and then all of a sudden they come up with things that you didn't expect. That's always really upsetting. So when it comes to these types of games, I always get pretty nervous because I know I put in a lot of effort and I want to make sure that I come out on top. But I played Trev last year, and he is a really, really formidable opponent. I know that it's going to be tough to beat him this year because he's got a really scary team. But I wouldn't say that I'm, particularly nervous because he is the champion. I'm just going to go out there and play every team, like it is the former champion, and play it like it's my last game, as the famous saying goes.
Okay, that sounds good and exciting. Who do you say is the scariest team that you have to play against?
You know what? That's tough. Let me take a quick look at the overview to try to answer that one. Well, the Brisbane Braylums are actually my first game, and I think that not only are they a scary team, but they also have certain things that just destroy me. So they're definitely up there. Outside of that, let me see. I think I know. I would probably have to say the Phoenix Sunflora, because Rizzy Powell, he drafted a really offensive team, and I love the looks of it. But it is just so threatening. I mean, he's got Mamoswine, Mega Medicham, Bisharp, Torn, all on one team. I mean, Scolipede, a lot of these Pokemon are just so good. Jolteon is another, fast electric, like I mentioned before. Those are always good in the format. So his team just looks ridiculously threatening. May not have the best matchup against mine, or vice versa. I'm not sure. I didn't really look at it yet, but I know I'm playing him at some point, and there's no way that I have good checks to all of those things. Good defensive checks. Maybe I have good offensive checks to some of them, but definitely not going to have good offensive checks to all of those. So definitely a team that I need to look out for, because it's a really powerful looking squad, and with all those ridiculous offensive threats, it's not going to be a game where I'm going to be able to just rely on some of my good defensive synergy to win it.
Well, who do you think is going to be the MVP of your team?
I would probably have to say Mega Gardevoir, just because it's just so good in this format. Like you mentioned, it's probably the best Pokemon in the format in a lot of ways, because obviously you have things like Mew that can basically do anything, but Mega Gardevoir, as I mentioned before, is just so hard to switch into naturally, and for whatever could kind of switch into its stabs or its coverage moves can just get destroyed by something else. So that's something that makes Gardevoir just an absolute terror in this format, and it's so easy to play because unless your opponent just literally plans for Gardevoir with every single Pokemon that they have, there are going to be ways that Gardevoir can get in free. There are going to be ways that Gardevoir can really just do its thing and put in a lot of work. So I am expecting Gardevoir to be the MVP of my team because it is just so good at what it does that it's hard for it not to be. That's basically what it comes down to. It's just so amazing that as long as I support it pretty well and play it well, then I can't see Gardevoir not having a very good season.
Who is your favorite Pokemon that you want to use?
Oh, Infernape, absolutely.
Yeah, boy.
Yep.
So, what are your hopes and expectations for this season?
I set the bar pretty high this season because last season my goal was to make the playoffs, and I didn't expect to go with as good of a record as I did initially. I did come off to a good start at 4-0, but then I went on a 3-game slide, so I figured, this is me just getting used to the league. It's not going to be so easy to just kind of come out, but then I won my next 4 games, so I finished at 8-3, and then had a really, really tight game in the first round of the playoffs. So I was satisfied with that. I definitely wish that I could have tried to go further. I never really got a chance to play Jolt in a legitimate game because the one game that we had scheduled, he already had clinched the #1 seed. So we just kind of had a for fun battle. But I was, fairly satisfied with that. That was a good first season. And considering that my team, I don't think was too great, I think that was a pretty good starting point. But this season, I like my team better. I have more experience in the format now, and I think that I can go pretty deep. So, I would just normally say I want to go at least one round further than I did last year in the playoffs. But this season, I'm hoping to take it off. That's going to be my goal, to win the championship, because last season was to make the playoffs. This time, I think that with my team and with my extra experience, I think that I could possibly win the whole thing.
Remember last season you made a team. It was an NPL team, and then you went and you used it on the ladder, and I think you got to like the top 10 with it.
Yes.
Are you gonna do that again this season?
I think this season actually wouldn't even be so hard to do. But yeah, that was for Road to Realist. If you guys aren't familiar with that series, I just basically used pretty innovative and crazy teams to climb the ladder, and then for my last episode, I used this ridiculously not very good version of my NPL team in the OU tier to hit number 10 on the ladder, and that was pretty funny. But I would love to do that again. Road to Reels is a really fun series, and I would love to, as I've been speaking to a bunch of other NPL guys, I would love to have you guys in the Road to Reels videos from now on to just make it, really funny, less serious, and just kind of have a really, really good time, have a blast doing it. So that would be a lot of fun, and we could all make OU versions of our NPL team to try to climb with.
I think I showed you that in Road to Realist. I think I'm the realist with my Mewtwo Y set.
This is true.
So, a couple of last questions. Who makes your thumbnails?
Who makes my thumbnails? He doesn't want his name to be revealed, but he's very talented. He's a great artist and very generous for making my thumbnails pretty much week in and week out. So I really appreciate all of the work that he does for me. So thank you. You know who you are.
Sounds like a stupid horse.
Maybe he is. I don't know. I did get that vibe from him, but he's very nice and he makes great thumbnails. So I guess he's a good thumbnail making stupid horse.
His name is Dave Fernay, by the way. Sub to him. And final question: where are your gains?
Where are my gains?
Do you know what that means?
I know what that means. I think that my gains, I'm just taking all the gains that I've ever accumulated throughout my entire life, and I'm going to put them into my NPL season. So you'll see them by the end of this year.
Hey, that's nice. That was lit. Alright, thank you for your time, and any last words you want to give to the viewers?
No, thank you for having me. Definitely check out my channel if you want to follow these St. Louis Reshirams this year, guys. So I think we're going to have a good season. All around, this season's going to be amazing. The coaches are ridiculously good with all really solid teams. So it's going to be one hell of a season, and I'm just so excited for it. So definitely subscribe to all the other coaches. Subscribe to Dave Fernay here because he will make great thumbnails and funny videos for everybody. So thank you for having me, and that's it.
All right. Thank you all so much for watching, and this has been another NPL interview. We will see you next time.